to all of you who so tirelessly raise your voices out for those who perhaps are not able to raise their own voices or cannot for fear of losing their jobs. There are lots of ways in which our government sometimes elevate our voices and ways in which our government suppresses them. And I think that these two bills up in Tallahassee is exactly the latter. It is the state of Florida trying to suppress the voices of those of us who not only represent our local communities, but those of us who work in our local communities and know that the cost of living, for example, in Broward County is far different than it is in Plant City, for example, and that when we come together as a county, as a government, and we create ordinances that work for us, and they work for us not only now, but for many years, starting in 2002 to today. We have a very long history of the success of the living wage here in Broward County. It's success for businesses, it's success for families, it's success for creating a better, healthy work environment, both for those employees and for those companies that are competing for business. And we know that they work. So for Tallahassee to step forward and say they know best, they don't, especially in this area. They don't look back. They don't look back far enough to look at what the outcomes have been and really have a conversation about the true outcomes of the living wage and wage theft ordinances. Rather, they just have supposition and guesses and a whole lot of fear-mongering. So let me be perfectly clear. I oppose emphatically the efforts to preempt locally enacted living wage and wage recovery ordinances. I am, in essence, I guess you could call me the mother of the living wage ordinance in 2002. When I first learned about the living wage ordinance in Miami-Dade, I was so surprised that we didn't have one in Broward County. And while it did take me a year to get it before the county commission for a vote in 2002, I was thrilled when it passed and worked hard each of those years to ensure that the living wage stayed in place. We've had to change some of the elements around our living wage over the years. It didn't start the same and stay the same as it is today. In fact, we learned along the way how to make that wage ordinance better. And along that way, we've had our challenges as a county. We've gone through perhaps the most difficult economic times since the Great Depression, not just here in Broward County, and the state of Florida, but across our country. And Broward County has come through that process, still paying a living wage. When there were those on our dais that said, gee, our budgets are getting so tight, maybe we should cut back on the cost of living wage. The argument that we could balance our budget on the backs of the working poor just did not sit well with me, and ultimately did not sit well with the county commission that abandoned those ideas. But not before we talked about them. And it was the very talking about them that alarmed some of the companies that actually contract with us and pay a living wage, because they know what a benefit it has been to their companies. And in fact, for any media that would like to see a copy of the letters, there are 9 letters from the year 2007. So they are clearly not solicited by us for the challenges that the state is putting before us. But back then, those companies pleaded with the county to leave our living wage ordinance in places, citing the better worker productivity they had, the fact that they put out an ad for employment, they would have 10 to 15 applicants, where prior to living wage they might have 1 or 2, so they clearly had a better pool of applicants from which to run their companies. The loyalty of their employees was incredible. And marked changes, as well as individual companies citing their employees who could now afford to live in a better apartment, own a car for the first time, and many other things that low-wage families often cannot afford, in which the living wage creates a better, more viable community, able to use those dollars for other goods and services in the community, and by the whole, we all benefit. One of the complaints that Tallahassee has is that if one community or one county is paying a higher wage, then that might mean that others might follow that example. And I don't know about you, but I find that to be a very good thing. Isn't that exactly the kind of outcome we want? We want to see all boats lifted, and that's what the goals of the living wage are. A one-size-fits-all strategy that is being employed by the state is simply not going to work for Broward County. What it will do is only push more and more people into poverty. And Broward County, we know that paying our employees a good wage makes good sense. The living wage minimizes employee turnover and increases employee productivity, commitment, and as I said earlier, loyalty, as so many companies have already attested. Bills like this represent an ominous attempt to remove power from locally elected officials and make voters basically mere bystanders in the democratic process that define our communities. I am happy to be standing here today, joining other members of the community to urge a no vote on these harmful bills. These laws preempting local decisions, forbid municipalities and counties from writing living wage and other employee benefits into law, violating core conservative and democratic principles. Let me be clear, this misguided attempt undermines the ability of local governments to make our own decisions based on our local needs. We know best. Tallahassee does not know what is good for Broward County. Broward County knows what's best for Broward County, and since 2002, we've been proving it. We've gone through the worst economic times, and in 12 years outside of debt, we have not raised our millage rate. It has not contributed to a negative on our bottom line. In fact, Broward County has one of the strongest budgets in the state of Florida, with a AAA rating by the bonding companies for 2 of them, and a AA+ for the 3rd rating company. You can't tell me that you can come out having a strong budget, not raise taxes, have the strongest bond rating in the state, and pay your people well, and that's not a good thing. It is the best thing that can happen. For Tallahassee, we say, back off. Let us do our best that we have proven we can. Thanks.